Hello, welcome everyone to our Innovate for Health webinar. This is a project co-sponsored by the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, the Geneva Network, and the University of Akron IP and Technology Law Center. Thank you for attending. I'd like to share insights from our Innovate for Health project. This is a project that Stephen and Izell of ITIF and I started in 2018. And we're now releasing our third edition of the project this year, in fact, today. One of our motivations for this project is our strong belief and certain knowledge that innovation happens everywhere. The human mind, with its boundless innovative and creative capacity, is the one resource evenly distributed throughout the world. The human mind is the one infinite, inexhaustible resource. And so we believe that people everywhere in every country can contribute to global innovation and creativity. Citizens of emerging economies aren't merely consumers of the inventions and creative works from wealthier countries, they are also inventors, creators, and entrepreneurs themselves. All too often, this point is neglected in debates about global innovation and trade policy. While many agree with this observation, they sometimes express skepticism that life sciences innovation can happen in emerging economies. It is an expensive and complex endeavor. However, it's not the case that health innovation only happens in wealthy countries. All over the world, even in the least developed countries, innovators and entrepreneurs are solving global health problems. That's why we started Innovate for Health, to tell the stories of these innovators and entrepreneurs. Innovate for Health is a series of short case studies where we talk about these innovative solutions that are coming from emerging economies and how intellectual property is often the foundation on which these businesses and efforts are built. Now, these stories of these entrepreneurs, as I've said, don't happen in isolation. They depend on these key institutions that enable innovators to develop and deliver solutions to patients. I'll highlight four critical supports, and you're going to hear more about them during the presentations today. First, as I said, intellectual property rights give innovators the security to invest their time and resources. Second, it's often essential that there are programs to assist innovators and entrepreneurs with bringing their solutions to patients to help them build capacity. It's often technology transfer programs that fill this role, helping researchers translate their discoveries into treatments. Third, intellectual property rights provide the security needed for these great innovations to attract the investment they need to further develop and test them, bringing them through regulatory compliance and proof of concept. Fourth, and finally, intellectual property enables key partnerships. Often, entrepreneurs and innovators need to partner with bigger companies who have the capacity to distribute their and expertise to manufacture their products and comply with regulatory compliance. So, we're going to tell this story today, and through telling you about some of the great examples and introducing you to some of the entrepreneurs and innovators who have worked on these important solutions. Before I do that, before I turn it over to our speakers, I'd like to introduce you to them in the order they'll be speaking. So first we have Sandra Barbosu. She's the Associate Director of ITIF's Center for Life Sciences and Innovation and one of the principal authors of the Innovate for Health report this year. She researches factors underlying life sciences innovation. She's also an adjunct professor at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. She holds a PhD in strategic management from the University of Toronto and an MSc in precision cancer medicine from Oxford. Douglas Park is a research fellow at the University of Akron School of Law Center for Intellectual Property Law and Technology. He's one of the other principal authors of this year's Innovate4Health report. He's a graduate of Penn State Dickinson School of Law and the University of University of Indiana. He is the co-author and author of several policy papers on global health and IP. Anna Shu is one of our innovators. She is professor of molecular diagnostics at Oxford University and co-founder CMO of Serenox Africa and UK. Her research focuses on identifying markers of disease progression for lymphocytic leukemia using whole genome sequencing. She founded and directs the Oxford Molecular Diagnostics Center. Finally, our last speaker will be one of our other innovators, Musa Salem. He's co-founder and CTO of Incura with expertise in chemistry and biomaterials. He manages the scaling of Incura's innovative solutions and was previously a graduate visiting researcher at Harvard Medical School. He specializes in medical device product design and development. So at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Sandra and look forward to hearing the remarks from our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. My name is Sandra Barbosu. As Mark said, I'm Associate Director of the Center for Life Sciences Innovation at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF. We are a leading science and technology think tank based in Washington, D.C., and the mission of our Life Sciences Center is to study and advance the many technology, economic, and policy factors that underpin successful life sciences innovation. Everything from how new technologies like AI and gene editing are driving the next generation of biomedical advances to the economics of innovation, such as the role of intellectual property rights and its incentives, as well as the optimal set of public policies, both domestic and abroad, that can help spur greater levels of biopharmaceutical innovation. Next slide, please. The Innovate4Health project embodies our mission to tackle global health challenges by harnessing the power of innovation that happens all around the world. Today, innovative medicines, devices, and technologies are transforming healthcare and improving health outcomes globally, with IP rights often serving as a key enabler. Our project aims to highlight the vital role of IP rights in driving innovation and to showcase how robust IP frameworks empower inventors, particularly in developing countries, to create transformative solutions that address urgent health needs. Patents, the most common form of IP, provide temporary exclusivity, allowing innovators to recoup costly and risky R&D investments. They also foster collaboration and knowledge sharing, contributing to a global innovation ecosystem. However, the urgent needs for therapies can sometimes lead to impatience with IP rights, treating innovators as obstacles. We believe that better public policy comes from understanding how innovation, supported by robust IP rights, addresses global health challenges, and our organizations, ITIF, UAIP, and the Geneva Network, have teamed up to share this important story. On our side, I would also like to mention that Stephen Ezel and I would like to also thank our Life Sciences Fellow, Natalie Koo, a student at King's College London, for all her contributions to this project. So the purpose of Innovate4Health is twofold. First of all, to highlight that health innovation occurs everywhere around the world, and second, to show the importance of IP as a driving force behind this innovation. Next slide, please. Over the past several months, we've identified, researched, and written 26 original case studies that highlight cutting-edge health innovations from across the globe, publishing a new case study on Medium every week. These case studies showcase how innovators, many of them in developing countries, are driving breakthroughs in the life sciences. Today, we're thrilled to have the founders of two of the most exciting innovations with us to share their stories, and we'll hear from them in a little while. All 26 case studies have been compiled into a report that we released yesterday, marking the third installment of this project, following a first report in 2018 and another report in 2019 that was focused on Latin America. This latest installment features innovations from 18 countries across 5 regions: Latin America, Southeast Asia, the Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. The case studies focus on 5 key themes. First, removing practical barriers to accessing treatments. Second, simplifying treatments and diagnostics to enable access. Third, increasing efficacy and reducing the side effects of existing therapies. Fourth, making personalized medicine accessible to more patients. And finally, reducing the global burden of non-communicable diseases. Together, these case studies illustrate how innovators are leveraging IP-enabled life sciences solutions to tackle some of the most pressing global health challenges. Let me share a couple of examples that highlight these themes. Next slide. MScan is a groundbreaking innovation from Uganda and seeks to make prenatal care accessible to more women in underserved regions. This patented, locally designed, low-cost, portable, and power-efficient ultrasound probe connects to a smartphone or laptop and delivers affordable sonograms to pregnant mothers in rural Africa at just 1/10 the cost of traditional ultrasound machines. While ultrasound is a critical component of prenatal care and is widely available in high-income countries, it remains largely inaccessible in regions such as sub-Saharan Africa, with 60% of women in the region going through an entire pregnancy without a single scan. Among other factors, this lack of prenatal care has contributed to 2/3 of global maternal deaths occurring in sub-Saharan Africa. So MScan is a transformative solution to this urgent maternal health crisis that brings advanced prenatal care to those who need it the most. Next slide, please. Another compelling example is ImmunoAct's NextCAR19 therapy from India, which is designed to expand access to life-saving treatments for lymphoma and leukemia. Each year, approximately 70,000 people in India die from blood cancers, with many unable to access or afford treatment, as the average cost typically exceeds $4,000. To address this challenge, there has been a concerted effort to develop and produce innovative therapies domestically. NextCAR19, developed by ImmunoAct in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, is one of the first cancer therapies created entirely in India. This breakthrough drug empowers a patient's immune system to combat leukemias and B-cell lymphomas. Reforms in the mid-2000s that strengthened IP rights in India have played a critical role in enabling life sciences companies such as ImmunoAct to secure patents for their innovations. These patents have in turn helped the company attract the necessary funding to develop and bring transformative therapies like NextCAR19 to patients. Next slide, please. Now, why are IP rights so important for innovation in the life sciences? So let me briefly discuss this from an economic perspective. IP rights, such as patents, are crucial for incentivizing innovation because they grant inventors a period of market exclusivity to recoup their R&D investments. This is particularly vital in the high-cost, high-risk life sciences industry, where, for example, developing a single drug can take over a decade and cost more than $1 billion, with many projects failing along the way. Market exclusivity enables companies to undertake ambitious R&D, fostering life-saving breakthroughs and driving economic growth. Strong IP rights also facilitate collaboration, licensing, and knowledge sharing, advancing global healthcare and attracting investment. Studies show that robust IP frameworks boost domestic R&D, inflows of foreign direct investment, and exports, making countries more attractive for global pharmaceutical companies and fueling a virtuous cycle of innovation and economic growth. For startups, patents are particularly impactful because they help them secure critical funding and achieve rapid growth. Startups that are granted a patent see, on average, 55% higher employment growth and 80% higher sales growth after 5 years. They are also 47% more likely to secure funding from VCs, banks, or other public investors, and obtain future patents. Patents provide market power, facilitate licensing agreements, and reassure investors about a startup's ability to monetize its inventions. They enable startups to share invention details with less fear of expropriation and also serve as a quality signal, demonstrating novelty and utility in markets where information gaps tend to be quite significant. So in short, IP rights are foundational to life sciences innovation because they encourage investment and protect discoveries, driving economic progress and delivering transformative health solutions all around the world. And next slide. I would like to thank everybody for your attention, and I think now we're moving on to Doug.
Hello, thank you, Sandra. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Doug Park, Research Fellow at the University of Akron IP Center. One thing that you might have noticed as Sandra was talking is sharing comes up a lot in our discussion of how these innovations come about. Patent law is really designed around the idea of sharing these innovations with people. And one of the ways that this has been kind of not codified, but systematized is in technology transfer programs. So the idea is basically that individual firms have individual strengths and things that they're good at. We have a lot of entities that have specialized in certain things. So certain research groups with universities are really good at looking into how things work and coming up with ideas and proofs of concept, but then they have to hand those off to maybe more commercialized firms, laboratories generally, that can actually invest in research and development and refining these proofs of concept into like a marketable product that can be sold and distributed to people around the world. And then from there, they have to hand it off to distribution centers, and there's all kinds of shipping involved and all of these things. So unfortunately, because no one entity can do all of this on its own, not feasibly anyway, we have programs that basically use intellectual property rights as a foundation to build not supply chains, but basically lines of handing off the IP, handing off the innovation, whatever it is, to make sure that it gets through all of the necessary steps to become a thing that people can use. In this case, a lot of that means medicine. So we go from something like, take our Urban Next case study, for example, where we have a tawa herb, which has been used by Filipino people for centuries to fight dengue fever. They brew it into a tea, and it's been used for years and years and years. But the harvesting and refinement of this herb is hard to do on a small scale. So instead, what we've done, or rather what UrbanX Laboratories has done, is they've taken the herb and by patenting the process of refinement, they've secured IP rights that can then be used to support the investment that various investors, venture capitalists, etc., will make into this product. And then it can be refined through the general research and development process. Clinical trials rely very heavily on this. And it can be basically processed and refined and made consistent. One of the things about herbal medicine is that it's really hard to get specific dosages. It's hard to make sure that every individual dose has the same amount and the same efficacy. So this is a great way to make sure that we have consistent and reliable dosages, even with something as simple and accessible as herbal medicine. So in this way, you can see that tech transfer offices, which are very widespread, most large universities have programs like these. For instance, the King Abdullah University in Saudi Arabia has a very robust tech transfer program. We have at least 2 or 3 different case studies that look at innovations that have gone through the King Abdullah tech transfer program. For instance, we have the stem cell treatments for leukemia that Dr. Asma Saeed Al-Amoudi invented. Basically, these offices, based on and using the IP rights that these innovators have secured for their inventions, have organized the process of handoff necessary to refine and distribute these medicines. So in effect, using the intellectual property rights involved, technology transfer offices can ensure that we have investment support for these innovations, that each step of the process gets the expertise that it needs to make sure that everything meets the necessary standards, and it helps to create a global framework where we're forming alliances between public and private entities. One of the big things in the US is we have the Bayh-Dole Act, which allows securing IP rights on government-funded research. Government's great at redistributing funds to make research possible, but then you have to allow these innovations to be supported and redistributed through tech transfer programs to make sure that they are refined and perfected in the way that they need to be. So at the end of the day, it's all about collaboration. It's about sharing and making sure that we have all the necessary expertise, that no one person, no one entity is bogarting any sort of line of refinement for an innovation to make sure that we actually get all of the necessary pieces of the process. Thank you. I hand it off to Anna.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug, and thanks for the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm a professor of molecular diagnostics at the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom, and I spent the last 8 years or so mentoring my colleagues in Tanzania and Uganda. And as a result of this and some funding we got for a global health program by the UK government, we essentially founded a social enterprise called Serenox Africa. The aim of this company is to enhance welfare of adults and children in low-middle income countries by democratizing access to quality, timely and affordable clinical diagnostic technology solutions. Next slide, please. The problem is summarized on this slide, and it's of a big scale. In low-middle income countries, many diseases can actually be easily cured or well controlled with affordable therapies. However, they're either not diagnosed or they are misdiagnosed. And like everywhere else in the world, diagnostics is sort of sometimes neglected when it comes to the life science sector that primarily focuses on therapeutics. Why is diagnostics a problem? Because there's a lack of laboratory staff and expertise in many parts of the world. Timelines, turnaround times, and the logistics of and procurement of getting laboratory reagents and tests in and out of the country are long and prohibitive for many of the life-saving diagnostics. Very often the price of importation and on shipping of either samples or reagents is exorbitant and unaffordable for the majority of people. There's a history of bringing and using technology transfer of technologies that are outdated and actually lack precision in many parts or in many aspects of especially non-communicable diseases, where tech transfer focuses on bringing technologies to low-middle income countries that are 60, 70 years old, and instead of leapfrogging to newer technologies. Adaptability is another issue that often occurs because some technologies, in particular technologies that using a lot of bandwidth and compute, might not be easily transferable to parts of the world, and then the supply chains that I've already mentioned. Next slide, please. So about 47% of the world's population cannot access DNA-based diagnostics that are essential for diagnosing and treating diseases. Apart from the access problem, one of the major obstacles, I believe, is the fact that diagnostic companies usually target the US market, and therefore they are targeting US FDA approval processes, which costs millions and millions of dollars, making those diagnostics unaffordable, even if they were maybe affordable in the first place. This then leads to unproven diagnostic tests from many other parts of the world to actually then infiltrate those markets, especially markets where regulatory processes are either not in place or not enforced. Now, the impact of this is that millions of lives are being shortened due to late or inaccurate diagnosis. Next slide, please. What can we do about it? So the SEREN's solution is local quality control, assurance and local control over the sample and the sample processing and analysis, but then central analysis of the test results, in particular when it comes to DNA testing. So in Serenox, we are aiming to vet and certify the local laboratories for example, DNA sequencing production. We are then analyzing together with the staff in the local communities data in the cloud, and then producing a report that is authorized for diagnostics by the local collaborator. Next slide, please. We are particularly focusing on diagnostics that involves circulating tumor DNA or circulating fetal DNA from maternal plasma taken from pregnant women. So these are called liquid biopsies. Liquid biopsies contain very small amounts of circulating DNA that can inform diagnostics, both within the fetus, but then also in patients who carry tumors. And we're identifying various different signals from this circulating tumor DNA. Next slide, please. The first example I would like to give you is to where we basically introduced and performed tech transfer of a technology for rapid and accurate diagnosis of Epstein-Barr virus positive Burkitt lymphoma. You might not have heard about this, but it's the most common cancer in the world in children worldwide. It only occurs in around the equator because it is linked to malaria, and it is also linked to a very early infection with Epstein-Barr virus, which is classical in sub-Saharan Africa. So this cancer is lethal within 6 months of diagnosis unless it is treated. It can be treated really easily, and treatment is free of charge in all sub-Saharan countries for these children. However, the diagnosis is very often delayed due to the absence of histopathology, adequate histopathology services and facilities that can perform invasive biopsies. So here we developed a test where we can diagnose this cancer just from a blood test from children that is rapid. Our data shows 11 days versus 110 days with a normal pathology, with a diagnostic yield of over almost 90% versus 42% with the pathology. This leads to improved survival of the children because they're diagnosed more early. And importantly, the same test can also be used as a surrogate endpoint in vaccination studies. So when we start to treat children to prevent with vaccines to try and prevent this tumor from recurring, we can use the liquid biopsy test to look for early response to the vaccine. And that is really important in drug development because it saves a lot of time and effort. Next slide, please. The second example is where we are now enlarging this indication from a childhood cancer diagnosis to actually a multi-cancer detection test. Many of you will have heard of Grail or other companies commercializing a multi-cancer detection test. Again, the principle is the same. It's a simple blood draw, following which you may or may not come up with a diagnosis of an early cancer. Why it is important to diagnose cancer early? In the example here in the cartoon for colorectal cancer, it's the same for many other cancers. More than 9 out of 10 people actually survive 5 years or more if they're diagnosed at early stages. at a fraction of the treatment cost versus the late-stage cancers where less than 1 in 10 survive for more than 5 years, and the costs are ever increasing with the increase in drug treatments. So multi-cancer early detection market is predicted to increase to a market of about $3 billion. Now, this market is almost exclusively within the so-called developed world in Europe and the US, and does completely neglect the global cancer pandemic, as the WHO calls it, in the rest of the world. So what we are trying to do with our technology, now called Triox, is to address this gap. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So Triox is a simple algorithm that is protected and that we are using for early cancer diagnosis. I won't go too much into the details, but the principle is that these patients would be and the samples would be tested locally under the quality assurance of CERN, and then the data will be analyzed centrally in the cloud. Next slide, please. The third example is about the diagnosis of sickle cell disease, where CERN has developed a suite of testing, both to identify carrier mothers and then to go on and identify affected fetuses from 10 weeks of pregnancy onwards. This is important because 400,000 infants are born with sickle cell disease worldwide, and 95% of those die within the first 5 years of life. It is very important to establish the diagnosis at birth, or even better before birth, so that the mothers can be followed up during pregnancies and can be taught and early death can be prevented in those children. Our test is unique in that it is low cost. It detects the fetuses from 10 weeks onwards, and it does not need the paternal genotype, which is required for most other non-invasive prenatal testing. It's important in the sense that it can be used for premarital and preconception counseling, investigation of miscarriages, because women with sickle cell disease will have a much higher rate of miscarriages, and then in the personalization of pregnancy follow-up. Next slide, please. So finally, our social mission, I already alluded to this, is realized by the creation of a completely different entity called Serenox Africa. This is a full-service laboratory with a clinic based in Dar es Salaam. It opened about a year and a half ago now, and it offers quality-assured molecular testing, which is the first time in East Africa. And it is also a private-public partnership with that is supported by the Tanzanian government, the university, and the National Hospital. It does specialize in early cancer detection and in the diagnosis of blood diseases, such as also the Burkitt's lymphoma that I was talking about, and the sickle cell disease. And it is fully certified as an interventional clinical trial unit. So it can also be used, to further drug development and research into drug development. I will stop here and hand over to Musa.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me today for this amazing webinar and for ITIF for this amazing initiative. It touched me personally as a person from the MENA region, from a developed country, and highlighting the power of the IP. Let me start my presentation by giving you an eye-opening stat. Did you know that 90% of the medical devices in the MENA region are still imported, thus expensive and of limited availability? And the 10% that we do manufacture are what is called low-value goods, such as cotton, gauzes, and syringes. Can you go to the next slide, please? So my name is Musa Salem. I'm the co-founder of Incura, an IP factory for medical devices. At Incura, we are committed in empowering and solving these pressing challenges by developing and licensing IP-developed medical solutions. Next slide, please. How do we do that? We spot a market gap and need, especially in the MENA region. And then we go into our innovation hubs, our R&D labs, and we work until we reach a solution, an innovation that turns into an IP and a patent. And this is our product that goes into licensing and patent manufacturing. Next slide, please. And by this, we're not only solving a regional problem or like a local problem, we're also solving a global problem, as we're going to highlight later on. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let me give you two examples of products that we've actually developed and how we put our approach into an action. First, Colisol, the very first hemostatic sponge line in the MENA region. We are introducing it as dental tubes as well as surgical sheets. The main competitive advantages of the Colisol lies in two main aspects. Next slide, please. First, the absorption capacity that reaches up to 60 times its weight, meaning 1 gram of such material can absorb 60 grams of blood. Not only that, our product doesn't require pre-wetting, meaning it can directly be taken out of the package into the surgical site. And this is very important and challenging step during the surgeries. Next slide, please. And here, we didn't only innovate in the biomaterial aspect, but also in the manufacturing process. We have a manufacturing demonstration plant right now in Saudi introducing this product. And via innovation in the process engineering, with our amazing post-engineering team, we've been able to reduce the cost substantially to almost half of the benchmark price. Next slide, please. Getting to the second example, and this is the highlight of the ITIF today, Curacil. Curacil is a hemostatic powder for narrow and hard to reach surgical sites. And this is a hot topic globally right now because the world is going into a minimal invasive surgeries, laparoscopic surgeries. And there is an urgent need for a hemostatic powder that is able to penetrate the surface tension of the blood. And how did we do that? As you can see, next slide, please. We've been able to design and fabricate our microparticles in a concave structure, as you can see here, that resembles the red blood cells. Not only that, of the same size, 8 to 10 micrometers. And we've been able to introduce nanopores to the surface of the microparticle that enabled it to instantly penetrate the surface tension of the blood. As you can see in the next slide. This is an actual blood penetration test that we did for our product Curacil in comparison with the Surgicel powder and Arista. Surgicel powder is a J&J powder that has been introduced recently, solving the Arista problem that it doesn't able to penetrate the surface tension of the blood. Surgicel partially penetrates the surface tension of the blood. But can you imagine that Surgicel costs around $1,000 for only 5 box, for a box of five packages, 3 grams each. Arista product in Egypt costs around 6,000 LE. That's why it's very limited of limited availability. Next slide, please. These are part of the cytotoxicity results and the MTT results, as well as the hemostatic efficacy. I think it was in the previous slide, but going to the next slide, yeah. And this is for the saturated blood, cow blood. Going into the next slide, please. Yes, next one, yeah. So here, let me highlight 2 main aspects. First, Arista as a flagship product, starch-based product, works like developing the product by a process called enzymatic degradation, and that requires 5-step degradation process. And that means they have to go through some filtration steps that along the production process. That's why it costs a lot in that regard. We've been able to introduce it in a only 3-step production process, and that substantially enhances the cost effectiveness. And we are introducing it by 30% lower than the cost of the benchmark, thus democratizing access to not only to the MENA region, but also solving the global challenge of being able to introduce a powder that is capable of penetrating the surface tension of the blood. Going into the next slide. In our innovation hubs, we're not stopping here. We're actually developing biocompatible coatings for the stents, nitroxide-based coatings, as well as advanced wound dressing layers. As you can see in the next slide, we are developing 5-layer smart advanced wound dressing for highly exudating wounds. And this is in collaboration with Covestro Group from Germany. They are providing us with two layers, and this product to enter the market by the second quarter 2026. Going into the next slide. Yes, and we are in our R&D facilities, we are also developing a nanofiber-based wound dressing that is capable to lock in the exudates, and this is a persisting challenge regarding the returning exudates to the wounds that cause elongation in the healing process. Going into the next slide. Yeah, our R&D facilities are currently in Taos, KSA, as well as the American University in Cairo. Going into the next slide. Yes, this is the founding team, me and my co-founder, Wissam Sarhan. Going into the next slide. This is part of the amazing R&D team, as well as process engineering team, the next slide, as well as biological evaluation team in the next slide. Going into the next slide, these are our amazing advisory board that enables us to go to break the barrier of not only developing IPs as well as developing the pathway for them to be licensed and actually to become actual product in the market. Going into the next slide. These are our strategic partners so far, as well as partner manufacturers and Incura, democratizing access to healthcare.
Thank you, everyone, for those interesting and engaging presentations. I have a couple of things for the audience to consider. First, all of today's presentations can be found as PDF attachments on the ITIF event webpage. So you can go check there to see if you'd like to see more from those presentations. Second, we encourage our online viewers to submit questions for the speakers via the Slido link that can be found in the YouTube description or on the event webpage. Okay, so before we have any audience questions, I have a few questions for the authors and the other panelists. First of all, for our authors, Sandra and Doug, the report highlights how innovation often happens closest to the point of need. What patterns did you observe across the case studies about how local innovators are uniquely positioned to understand and solve their community's healthcare challenges?
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mark, for that question. So the report highlights that innovation actually often thrives closest to the point of need because I think local innovators are really uniquely positioned to understand their community's specific healthcare challenges. So across the case studies, the pattern that emerged was that innovators leverage very deep and fine-grained cultural, environmental, and social insights to design solutions that are both practical and impactful. So, for example, we saw that local innovators frequently create cost-effective technologies that are tailored to resource-constrained settings, for example, portable diagnostic tools or treatments that are adapted to prevalent diseases in those regions. And they also navigate logistical barriers, such as addressing limited infrastructure or designing solutions for rural populations with restricted access to healthcare. And I think this proximity allows them to identify pain points that might be overlooked by external stakeholders and to iterate solutions that align with the community's cultural norms and economic realities and needs. And I think this shows that by empowering local innovators through funding, intellectual property protections, and partnerships, this can accelerate progress in global health. And their ability to design these tailored, scalable solutions provides sort of a roadmap for addressing healthcare challenges in diverse and underserved settings. Thank you.
Thanks. Doug, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Sandra hit the nail on the head that a lot of this is just a matter of you can't necessarily see what's going on if you're not close enough to be able to see it. But one thing that I noticed pretty routinely is that a lot of these innovators have personal stories that family or friends or even the innovators themselves often had direct personal experiences with these healthcare problems. And I think that speaks a lot to both how healthcare resources are distributed, that we see a lot of innovation happening because necessity is the mother of invention. And in places where people have a lot of needs that aren't being met, they are that much more motivated to find other ways to meet those needs. But it really goes to show that a lot of these challenges and problems are very personal for people, and that without that motivation, sometimes the innovation just doesn't happen.
Thanks. Also for the authors, looking across all 26 case studies, what surprised you most about how innovators are tackling healthcare challenges in less wealthy countries? And what lessons might these, interesting or surprising insights hold for the future of global health innovation? Sandra?
Thanks, Mark. So one of the things that I noticed that was very nice was just the sheer ingenuity and resourcefulness of innovators in less wealthy countries in addressing all sorts of healthcare challenges. And these innovators are not simply replicating solutions from wealthier nations, but they're designing very tailored, cost-effective, impactful innovations that meet the unique needs of their populations. So, for example, we saw novel approaches, right, to reducing the cost of diagnostics, portable medical devices that expand access in rural areas, therapies entirely developed within local ecosystems. And so I think one of the key lessons for global health innovation is the importance of focusing on these context-specific solutions rather than one-size-fits-all approaches. And innovators in these regions often operate with limited produce very transformative results by leveraging this local knowledge, kind of frugal design principles, robust IP frameworks to attract funding and collaborations. And I think there's a lot to learn and can be applicable to developed countries as well in more remote areas. So I think there's a lot to learn here. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, and again, building on what Sandra said, I think the thing that maybe surprised me most was simply how broadly applicable a lot of these specific solutions are. So even though all of these innovations are happening in very specific situations where they're tailored to meet certain needs based on what resources they have available, a lot of the time that results in very modular technologies that can be applied broadly. So we've seen a lot of devices that are designed to communicate with computer systems or even like cell phones and smartphones. So a lot of the innovations that do happen end up being tied to sort of globally available technologies and end up being applicable in lots of situations outside of what we would expect. Another thing, kind of on a similar note, that I noticed is that a lot of things that we didn't really expect necessarily to be applicable in these ways ended up being helpful for treating COVID. So I mentioned the Urban Next laboratories and, excuse me, their Tawa Tawa herbal tea. Turns out not only is it great for treating dengue fever, it also helps to treat some of the more moderate symptoms of COVID. So certainly in 2020, 2021, this was invaluable for helping people who didn't necessarily have access to the fancier healthcare medicines to treat these symptoms. So thanks.
Thanks, Doug. For Anna Shu, your work with Serenox exemplifies one of the challenges the report talked about that's being addressed, making diagnostics more accessible in resource-constrained settings. What are the challenges and opportunities in the current environment for creating diagnostic solutions that can be both high quality and affordable enough for widespread use in resource-constrained settings in Africa and other places? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a very complex question. I think if you're asking me about the challenges, the first challenge I think will be to actually attract the funding that is required to start the innovations. And by that I mean that many of the innovators in low middle income countries probably have 5 full-time jobs, and if they want to focus on developing a product, then that needs funding for their salaries, etc., etc. I think the second challenge is the supply chains. So of course, when you're thinking about even easy diagnostic devices like lateral flow devices, we've seen this, we saw this during the pandemic. They're not being produced locally on the continent. So it's to establish those supply chains and to get industry partners engaged and interested in a market that is very much still in the very early stages in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. That is another huge challenge. The regulator itself or the government importation rules and trade agreements are often not in place. So there's huge delays in getting necessary equipment into the country. So those are I would say for diagnostics, the main challenges when it comes to tech transfer or the implementation. On the other side of the coin, though, the opportunities are equally huge, because we know that Africa is the fastest growing country in terms of population. There's many rich countries. There's a rapidly evolving middle class. Populations and the societies are changing at a speed that you can't even imagine, and it's not reflected in our current media, where we're still talking about people killing each other and HIV, when actually, in large parts of Africa, this is absolutely no longer true. So, and there's a cancer pandemic ongoing. It's not all about infectious disease. There's cardiovascular disease, there's diabetes. Many people in Africa in urban areas are now obese. So these are huge challenges, but they're at the same time huge opportunities for developing appropriate diagnostics in those areas of non-communicable diseases. Personally, I think for me, the two things that attract me to this work was, number one, the opportunities for mentorship and for having a very big impact with actually very little effort, and the second one is the leapfrogging that I already mentioned. So it's one thing to innovate in a already very in a very kind of, I'm calling it developed, in a very advanced healthcare system. It's something completely different if you can leapfrog into the next generation's innovations, because many of the obstacles that we have in Europe or in the United States when it comes to implementation or in innovation, they're not there in low middle income countries, and that can be a huge opportunity for as long as you can gain the trust of people, and by people I mean the policymakers, the payers, the people who make the decision.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, actually, these are two very important aspects regarding the challenges in the region. As Anna mentioned, one of them is actually the support, the VC support, or the financial support for startups that trying to go to this pathway, because there isn't so many examples in that regard. That's why. And there is a huge need for education to the market, to understand the value of IP, to understand the value of deep technologies, and the extended timelines of these kind of innovation to be there actually in the market. Typically for our region, it is fintech, like these e-commerce, startups that attract these huge investments. And this is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the availability of these specific products. As I mentioned, one of the products, Arista, that used to be in Egypt, a single package of 3 gram such product costs around 6,000 LE local currency. This is a huge a chunk of the money just for a single pack of 3 grams. And this is due to the lack of know-how, due to the lack of local manufacturing. And you're not going to be able to locally manufacture as long as you don't have locally produced innovations. And the manufacturers kind of afraid to take the risk of going into an innovation to invest into a administration plan, because they don't fully understand the value of investing in that direction. It's actually complicated in both sides. In Africa, because of the low resources. In the GCC side, it's kind of different aspect, because we currently operating in both sides. It's different aspect because they have the money to import. But right now, there is a trend going into local manufacturing and localizing the manufacturing process inside each and every country, because of the huge margins that is only paid for the IP and the price for the innovation itself. Yeah.
Thanks, Musa. And I guess I have an audience question that's actually almost the same as one of mine. These innovations are really impressive, and so for first the panelists, our innovators, and for Anna and Musa, and then for our authors, how have IP protections helped advance your solutions, or potentially can advance these solutions in getting them to patients? What's the role of the intellectual property in helping you get your job done? Anna, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because of course IP and patents in particular are not particularly protected outside the US and in Europe. So we, a long time ago, when we first did this invention of the non-invasive prenatal diagnostic test for sickle cell disease, it was patented in the US and in Europe. And if I had to start again, would I do it in the same way? Probably not. But it has actually helped. I should admit, it has actually helped. The test has been evaluated by the UK National Health Service. And clearly that helps to bring the technology not just into the UK, but also into Europe, at least. It's not going to go through US FDA approval, so I don't know exactly how it will work in the US, but in certainly for the UK and for Europe, it has helped. Now, what that means is, if you go in front of the typical VCs, right, and you say you have a technology and it's not protected, they will not even invite you for an interview. So that is basically the main thing. And then you get probably 90 seconds of their attention if it is protected. And then they want to know whether you're going to the US market. And that has been my experience many times over. So for these technologies that we want to bring into the other parts of the world, we need to come up with a different model. And philanthropy, I don't think works. So I haven't found a solution yet. But all I can say is that VCs are very difficult. But it's the patent that gives you the attention of the VCs. In answer to your question, VCs want a return on the investment within 2 to 3 years, which is impossible when you're thinking low middle income countries. So again, you do need a different model for this type of innovation.
Thanks, Anna. Musa.
Yeah, I think thanks, Anna, for making it not only our problem, but for problem for different companies working in the region. To answer your question, it helps us. It helped us actually in 2 main aspects. We've been struggling a lot initially in securing funds and having the VC fund. So it actually gave us the initial credibility to start the discussion, to start speaking with different VCs. At first, they were just clapping for you, but they're not willing to take the risk and to invest in your initiative. So, and that gives us like we had we've been lucky to came across Scouts, and they gave us the facility there, and they gave us the initial investment. Scouts itself gave us the initial investment that made kind of paved the way for other investors to hop in and to take the risk in that regard. This is one side of the equation. The other side, from our experience, is that we're a small startup. We've been just like starting, and we didn't have the capability to do manufacturing plants as well as a demonstration plant to actually transfer our technology into a manufacturing facility. So that was an instrument for us to be able to give license for a different manufacturer. And we are working on a like asset model, meaning that the manufacturer has the license for a certain period of time, and he's responsible for like purchasing all the required equipment for preparing the facility to that is required for such product to enter the market. So it actually helped us a lot in these two regards. Regarding the defensibility, and it's gonna be very protected by the patents, we're actually depending heavily in that regard. But we also have some certain like secret sauce, as we say about it, or secret recipes to ensure our protection in that regard. But initially in these both domains, it helped us in cracking them. Yeah.
Thanks. Sandra, any thoughts on the role of IP?
Sure. So from a research perspective, so there are a number of studies that show that strengthened IP rights, including patents, trademarks, copyright protections, have a significant positive association with, for example, domestic R&D, inbound FDI, and exports. There's a report from the OECD. I believe it's called the Policy Complements to the Strengthening of IPRs in Developing Countries, and shows that if you have, let's say, a 1% increase in the strength of IP rights. So what that means is basically there are these indexes all over the world that quantify how robust IP rights are in terms of how broad their coverage is, how enforced are they, what is the duration of protection. So if there's an increase in these in the strength of IP rights, there's an increase, quite a big increase in domestic R&D and the foreign direct inflows. And so I believe there's a number of things that can help also the economic growth of developing countries from strengthening IP systems. And I think as Anna and Musa also said, there's also a lot of studies that show that, in order to get your foot in the door with VCs, patents make a big difference as well. So there's a number of studies that echo those comments. Thank you.
Doug, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I think Anna, Musa, and Sandra have all really clearly and thoroughly addressed the practical realities of basically entering the market and actually producing these innovations. So from a higher, like a policy angle, I think it's really important to highlight that a lot of people think about IP rights as an incentive for innovation, that we talk about patents as this way to make money. And a lot of people sort of stop thinking about it there, and they don't realize just how important that funding is to actually making these innovations possible. So it's really not an incentive so much as it is a fundamental enabling factor in creating these innovations. You look at clinical trials, and the rates of success for clinical trials are so low that you have to have so much money just to push drugs through to get anything that actually gets approval from from the regional FDA, at which point that funding becomes vital for securing the next project that might be someone's life-saving medicine. So at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that we actually get medicines, healthcare, innovations at all. Thank you.
Thanks. So we have another question about the role of other, I guess, parties other than investors, the private investors in helping make these innovations happen. Has there been support from, for example, end users such as payers, governments, or patients, patient groups for development of these products? What conditions did they have for that investment? This is a question of audience interest, but I also think that it may be an opportunity to note some of the things like public-private partnership or support from university tech transfer offices that have played a role. It's not just the private investment. It starts with great science. It's often supported by other parties in the environment, in the ecosystem, and ultimately gets to patients through commercial development. But there are many hands, I guess, that help make these things happen. I guess, Anna, do you have any comments on that in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, for the liquid biopsy test for the children with Burkitt's lymphoma, we are now at the point where the Ugandan Ministry of Health is actually running a pilot to bring this technology into their healthcare system. And this is fully funded by the Ministry of Health. Now, by that I mean that the people who are already working in the sample collection facilities, the doctors, the clinicians, they've been made aware of this test, and then the sample collection, the shipment of the samples, all of this is happening in the Ministry of Health, in the public health systems usual system that they're also using for HIV and HPV sample testing. So so that's a good example of how, at least for the northern Ugandan region now, the Ministry of Health has put in extra resource, if you like, to make this test a reality for the children. During the actual development phase, the whole program was fully funded by the UK government, but we really try to decentralize powers as much as that's possible. So we had local principal investigators, we had community advisory boards who were regularly informed of progress of the study. We had patients traveling to international meetings, presenting results. Or in this case, it was parents of patients, of course. So there are many examples of how we're trying to involve public and patients in our research. Now, all the way from the design of the study, the initial design really came on the ground from people wanting a test, and then a more reliable test, more quicker test, and also the development of vaccines. So our next step in this whole program is actually to develop a vaccine against this particular cancer. So we are very much trying to involve the public according to the UK criteria of involve. We are also using all the UK framework for the Human Tissue Act when it comes to sample storage and analysis of samples. We are using international ethical frameworks, because I think that this is also important, that this is not something that is if you like, where we're cutting corners. Is we're trying to apply the rules and regulations that we are used to to operating in, also then to this context.
Thanks, Anna. Do you have any thoughts, Musa, on this point?
Yes, I think other than the VC money, there are two main aspects to discuss. First is the power of university, as well as the technology transfer offices. And this is not regarding the money, but the space and facility. Here we're speaking about new technologies that requires a lot of R&D activities to be done, and these R&D facilities are very hard to build. For universities to get access to a small, for researchers as well as innovators to use specific facilities and science park to perform their activities are very, very important. Then comes the technology transfer and the education that came with that, and understanding the process into it's not about only the innovation and the in a smaller scale, but how to actually scale up the process to make it viable for large scale production. So this is one side of the equation. The other side is obviously the government support, as Anna highlighted. And actually, it came clear to us we had a huge government support right now from the Saudi government, and that includes grants in developing the product. For example, we had a specific grant for the accuracy product that helped us a lot in pushing the product forward and getting the required approvals, as well as being able to carry out the very expensive clinical trials. So I think these are the very important side of the equation, and then comes the VC side. And I do believe when it comes to deep technologies and IP based technologies, the government has to play a pivotal role in that regard, because it requires government support, official support for the initial steps, for the idea to be a bidding for VC fund to come afterwards. Yeah.
Thanks, Musa. I think one thing we're hearing here is that the bringing solutions to patients is is the task of an advanced society where there are many actors, and all too often in our policy debates we boil it down to one thing, and people see that perhaps there was government funding for the early innovations or part of the way, and there's a reaction that, well, perhaps the taxpayers should get it for free. When I've talked to medical device developers and some of the pioneers with developing mRNA vaccines, and I posed this to them, they chuckled and they said that, look, it starts with great science, but university and researchers tend to want to do research at universities. They don't want to spend time on clinical trials or commercializing drugs. And the same thing with people who do regulatory compliance. They don't develop drugs, but they know how to get them through the regulatory system. There are people who know how to do manufacturing and logistics, and there are companies. And so we have this complex ecosystem where we rely on government actors, we rely on researchers, we rely on businesses, and indeed, government funding is often important. Many parties contribute to these, bringing these solutions to market. But ultimately, one of the things, at least so far, that helps us is intellectual property, because it provides the resources to do many of these activities, these demanding and expensive activities that get something from the laboratory to the patient. Sandra or Doug, do you have any further thoughts on these points?
Yeah, I can sort of round it out a little bit, I think. It seems like we talk a lot about a flow of resources and information that starts with the funding from government or VCs or whomever, or even starts with an idea in a lab that then later gets funding. But I think it's worth noting that we are really looking at more of a feedback loop, that the VCs and the government only fund the things that they think are going to be either worthwhile or will return the investments. And they make those evaluations based on what people need and what they want. So all of this is based on filling needs and meeting what it is that people need and want. So it's kind of a big cyclical thing that really reflects, ideally, the overall needs of the populace. So
Thanks. With that, I think we're
Yeah. I think
yeah.
I can
Musa,
add to
yeah, please do.
yeah
I
I
was
think
going to
I
ask you to
yes.
contribute your final thoughts. So thank you. Please do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very important point, but I think there is like a side product for the innovation cycle, which is which from my own perspective, very, very important side, which is developing homegrown talents and homegrown like hands-on skilled workers. So this is one side of the equation, I think, and this considered as important as having like a final product in the market, because these talents are going to be able to introduce not only one product through only one channel, but multiple products through multiple challenges. Channels. Yeah, this is in brief. Yeah.
Thanks, Musa. Any final thoughts from our other panelists? Okay, well, thank you. This has been a great experience, as our previous two editions have been. There's really nothing more inspiring to me than seeing, how innovators and dedicated researchers and entrepreneurs are really working on solutions to help people all over the world. I think it's a hopeful story. In public health debates, we often get pessimistic, and there are many challenges, but there are a lot of smart, dedicated, passionate people working on them. And we like telling those stories in Innovate for Health. And we're grateful for people who are doing important things like Anna and Musa to take some time with us to tell us about what they're doing. I often feel when I talk to people like you who are so bright and dedicated that I worry that I'm taking time away from humanity because you're spending time solving humanity's problems. But thank you for taking the time to share with us. And I'm so appreciative of what you do, and so appreciative of all the innovators we profiled. We hope you'll you'll go to the website for the event and the ITIF website where you can download the book version of the report where we profile all these innovators, and just consider, how, as those of you who are involved in policy, let's always consider how we can make the efforts of these innovators easier. It's hard enough to come up with great science. We should build the institutions that make it more possible for them to deliver these great innovations to patients, because it's happening all over the world, and that's the story of Innovate for Health. Thank you so much. Thank you especially to Anna and Musa. Thank you to Doug, Sandra, and everybody else who worked on the report. We're grateful, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Good afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are, and thank you.